everyone. And I'm so thankful to Jennifer for providing these beautiful date nights, and also the Marriage Enrichment Planning Committee, and because they're wonderful. And since Jennifer's been having them, I've been going on more date nights as a priest than I ever have in my life. To be honest, there was something missing in my priesthood for some reason. So it's just a joy. And I'm thinking Jesus was always looking for signs of God's love that just reflected God's love. And he noticed that the love of husband and wife had a natural knack for signifying the love of God for his people. And Jesus, in recognizing that, he elevated marriage to a sacrament and used that occasion for his first miracle. And he saved the day for that couple on their wedding day and their reception. And the neat thing about that couple is that they had invited Jesus and his mother Mary and some of the disciples to their wedding. They'd invited Jesus to their wedding. And we don't hear of that couple anymore in the Gospels, but the hope is that they continued to have a friendship with him throughout their marriage, and that Jesus continued to work miracles for them, bringing them joy, because wine is a symbol of joy. Restoring joy to their relationship and their marriage through difficult times. So tonight, on this date night, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for your vocations of marriage. They're the building block of the church. Because in the church we have a couple priests and sisters, but it's really the folks. It really is our families. Married couples and our families, they are the church. You are the church. And through you, people get a glimpse of God's love, the way you mirror your love for each other. So it's so wonderful. And I always think every time we pass an anniversary, wow, your love for each other becomes even more powerful. That's another year under your belt, another year of witness. So keep it up. And we're so happy tonight to have Michael and Alicia with us and share their beautiful vocation of marriage and their wisdom. So Jennifer, again, thanks for all your great work. Jennifer holds many titles. She is Director of Marriage Enrichment. She's Confirmation Coordinator. And she is Ecumenical Ministries Coordinator here in our parish. And she does it all so beautifully. So thank you, Jennifer.
So let me tell you a little bit about them. Michael and Alicia are the founders of the Messy Family Project, and their ministry empowers moms and dads to embrace their sacred calling within their domestic church and gives them the tools to do so. They've been married for 25 years, or 26 years this year. 29 years. 29 years. They have 10 children, and they are grandparents. I know you would not know that they're grandparents. So they've been inspirational, and they share practical insights for family life, for parents throughout the world. With their podcast, they have fantastic downloadable resources. Their website's amazing. They have online workshops and webinars. And then one of my favorites is their virtual date nights, especially the one with Chris and Natalie Stefanik. Oh, that one was so good. I think I watched that one twice at least. So they're great virtual date nights. Anytime they have a date night, I always post it on our Marriage Enrichment Ministry Facebook page. And I'm always sharing their resources and tagging their website, their upcoming events on our Marriage Enrichment Ministry flock note too. So if you get our Marriage Enrichment Ministry flock note, it comes out on the first of every month. And I'm going to continue to share their information. Their children have been their greatest joy and challenge in life. Without their children, there would be no podcast. And what I always really appreciate about them is they're always honest, authentic, and intentional. And then Alicia, her laugh and her smile is just contagious too. They have amazing messages that they're always sharing about marriage, about marriages, marriage enrichment, about children, and you would think, how do they make time for all that? Like, how do they make time for their family and for the ministry and their outreach? And Michael once said, simply, we make time. So it's for them setting their priorities. I love their message of them always sharing too that a marriage is a path to holiness. And how many of you were at the parish mission this past week too? Oh, great number. So a lot of what their message is too is what Father Simeon Gallagher was talking about too. And having them come, and it wasn't even planned this way, like their message being followed by Father Simeon Gallagher too is such a blessing. What their message is, what we just received for the last couple of days too. Some of their date night podcasts, they're various topics. There's something for everyone. Some of them are about pursuing your spouse, dating your spouse, dealing with anger, when loving your spouse is hard, and the importance of date night, which leads us here to tonight. So thank you guys for all being here for tonight, for supporting the Marriage Enrichment Ministry, and for us to be in community together, for us all to grow in holiness together. So without further ado, we welcome Michael and Alicia Hernon.
We are Mike and Alicia Hernon, and we really are delighted to be here. And there are some listeners to the podcast over here. Yes, okay, excellent. We have, I'll just go. I'll just tell you the story. Since we're at a date night, there is a story, and it goes like this. There were a whole bunch of married couples who died and went to heaven at the same time. And God the Father looks out on the crowd assembled and says, hey, we're going to have an orderly procession into heaven. And he says, first, I'd like all the men, where's the speaker? All the men who were the heads of their household, the spiritual leaders in their home, to line up here in this first line. And I'd like all the men who were henpecked and dominated by their wives to line up in the second line. And all wives go see St. Peter, you have easy access to heaven. So as the lines are being formed, God looks out, and there is one lone man in that first line, who is the spiritual leader in his household. And then the second line goes around the corner. God looks out and says, my sons, I've challenged you. I've given you grace. I've called you on to be the leaders in your home. He says, learn from this man. And he looks down at the one guy and says, my son, how did you come to be in this line? He looks up kind of sheepishly at God and says, I don't know, my wife just told me to stand here. So no matter what reason you're here tonight, we are glad you are with us. We have tried to be in our lives a little bit more intentional each year with our marriage and family life. And I feel like that's it's part of our journey, right? And all of us at different stages are always working to be a little bit more intentional. And as you can tell from our ministry name and even the title we chose for tonight's talk, Messy. Why messy? Because we wanted people to laugh when they heard our name. And if you've had a child for more than 5 seconds, you know family life is a little messy, right? But really why we chose that name is because we don't want the photoshopped, Pinterest perfect image of what your life is all about. We don't want this idealistic, removed from reality image. We want something real, something authentic. Has anyone ever baked with little children? How clean a process was that? Yeah, we don't involve children in that process because we think it's going to be more efficient, more necessarily effective. But we do it because of the tradition. We do it because of community building. We do it because of the relationships and the bonding that we create. And that's what we're talking about when we say messy. And what's beautiful about God and His wisdom is that He takes the small little efforts that we bring and He does amazing things. He multiplies our loaves and our fishes. And He always uses the small little things, the 5 stones that David used to take down Goliath, or the simple yes of the Virgin Mary. that changed the world forever. And he uses our small little things in our home, often unseen, between spouses and between moms and dads with their kids. It's those moments that really have this beautiful cosmic impact, if you will. And we believe that by renewing the family, by renewing our marriage and family life, that is how we're going to renew the church.
And really, like Father said, the family is the building. I think I should stand here. Right? Okay. We're going to have to not only share microphones, but share spots. But the family is the building block of the church, right? And like Mike was just saying, that smallest of economies. And we really believe that this is the age of the family. That is what our church means, that by renewing the family, we will renew the church. So can everybody agree, pretty much, the church is in crisis today, right? The church is in crisis. But you know one thing my mom said, if you look at the history of the church is always in crisis. Right? There is always a crisis. And God always gives the church what she needs when she needs it. Right? In the age when monasticism was under attack, he gave us St. Benedict and the Benedictines. When we had the age of enlightenment and people leaving the faith, he gave us St. Ignatius and the Jesuits. He always raises up, speaks to the church, and raises up orders of religious orders and people of the time to respond to the crisis of the church. How is the Holy Spirit speaking to the church now? Right? Because God knew we were going to be in this crisis. I think he knew that. Don't you think? Yes, of course. God knew where we would be, and so he's been preparing us for this moment. And we look at how has the Holy Spirit been speaking to the church in the 20th century? Well, the first thing is Vatican II, right? What was the message of Vatican II? It was the call to the laity. It was saying holiness is not just for religious and consecrated. Holiness is for everyone. And it was the call for the laity to take their place within the life of the church. And then we have the great John Paul II, who came and magnified that even more and called the laity to use their gifts for the church and really confirmed and affirmed that role. And then he taught us, John Paul taught us in so many ways through the theology of the body that our vocation is not just as married people raising children. This isn't just good and necessary, but this is holy and pleasing to God, and this is how we become saints in our home. This is why we believe this is the age of the family. Social science research shows that the family started breaking down, and then church attendance started falling. Okay, so those two things, church and family, faith and family, depend on each other. So wouldn't it also be true that if we renew the family, that's how we renew the church? So why we are here today and what our whole life, our ministry is dedicated to, is to helping families. Because this is how we are going to renew the church and bring the light of Christ to all people. So now, when I say it's very easy to stand up here and say all this, right? But I know there's some of you moms sitting out here being like, you know what? I'm really just trying to get all the laundry done and get the kids to bed, so I don't know about renewing the church. Maybe, I don't know if I can fit that into my schedule, right? Because this is being a mom, being at home with kids, being a dad, working every day, all of that, we know that is where the rubber hits the road, right? And so renewing the church may not be something that is the forefront of your mind, but that is okay. That is okay. Because once again, the church has taught us, in the great encyclical Familiaris Consortio, John Paul says, each family finds within itself a summons that cannot be ignored, that specifies its dignity and responsibility. Family become what you are. So what does that mean? How are you going to renew the church? By being a better mother, by being a better father, by being a better wife, all right? A better husband, a better grandfather, aunt, uncle. By being who God has called us to be within the family, that's how we will renew the church.
And we're really inspired by this. We're really passionate about this because we believe the Catholic family has what the whole world is looking for. I say that again. We believe the Catholic family has what the whole world is looking for. This is the pearl of great price out there. And we want to take time tonight to really share with you some principles and some ideas. But our hope is that this is an opportunity to go deeper into who you are in your primary vocation as a married couple, as moms and dads. As for us, we're grandpa, or I'm papa, and she's noni. She's not grandma, just to be clear. But our hope is that on our podcast and all that we do, that we simply spark a conversation between the two of you. And for some of you, as we talk about this, there'll be like reminders of things gone by. And for some of you, there might be some new ideas that come. But the whole point is we want to begin again to look at our lives and think about what could God be doing for us in our marriage, in our family, and our family culture. And the hope is with the handout we shared with you, that it will summarize some of the points we're making, but also have discussions for you as a future date night conversation. So we'll go through, we have 4 points that we're going to share with you tonight, and we hope you can discuss these with your spouse, because we want you to be holy. The church wants and needs you to be holy, which means we're investing more deeply in this, which is our primary vocation. This is our sacred calling. Now, you may start by thinking, okay, so I got it. Now, those who have young kids still in the home, right? You may be thinking, okay, so I'm supposed to be raising up the next Benedict or Benedict and Scholastica, right? or Jacinta and Francesco. And that may happen, but that isn't necessarily the first goal of parenting. And this is our first point. It's not your job to turn your kids into a saint. It's actually their job to turn you into a saint. Right? In the idea that we want to flip the script and say, okay, we're trying to form these perfect little people, when actually they're bringing out stuff in us. They're drawing things out of us and helping turn us into saints.
So I don't know if any of you feel like this, but I actually thought I was a good person until I had children. I was really, really holy, you know. Then I got married and had kids, and I realized, yeah, no, not really. I have a lot of work. So I'll just tell you a little story. So when I was a young mom, one of my near occasions of sin was potty training. Not kidding. So I remember when my oldest daughter, Katie, was 3, I was probably pregnant, you know, and I had 2 other kids. So I was like 3 under 3, getting ready for another baby coming. And I saw potty training as my way of like, you know, digging out of the mountain of diapers, you know, that I was in every day. So potty training was very, very important to me. So I found this book, and it's called Potty Training in Less Than a Day. Okay? And yeah, I always say you can laugh now, yeah. But the point of this book was that if you do, so it just kind of laid it all out. You do this, you do this, you do this. You just follow the program, and then at the end of the day, your child will be potty trained. And I was like, great, I can do that. You know, I like to follow recipes. I like to, okay, is this how you potty train your child? Okay, I got it. So I read through the book, you know, I had it all, you know, whatever. So the morning went great. Everything in the morning went fine. And then in the afternoon, she's getting tired, I'm getting tired, you know, and she has an accident. Okay, so in the book, it says that when your baby or when your child has an accident, you're supposed to have them practice. So practice is, they're playing and you say, okay, we're going to practice. And so they're supposed to go over to the potty, pull their pants down, sit down, stand up, pull their pants up, then go back and then just kind of go do that 10 times, right? You've got to practice 10 times, right? This is what it looked like for me. I was like, Katie, get over here, sit down, stand up, pull your pants up, go, get over here, get out. I'm like yelling, and she's crying, just, oh, you know, going back and forth, and I was just like, just very, very frustrated. So then later in the afternoon, you know, Dad comes home, you know, he's floating in, hello, everyone, you know, he's all happy and smiling, and I'm like, you know, ready to pull my hair out. And I remember walking up the stairs, and, you know, the bathroom's at the top of the steps, and little Katie is like sitting on her potty, and Mike's in his suit, you know, and he's like crouched down in front of her, and he's very patiently listening to her, and she goes, Daddy, Mommy's scary. And I remember just sitting down on the step right there and just laughing/crying, and really feeling my need for God's mercy more than ever before. And that's just one, there's many instances like that. But I realized that I needed to be grateful for that situation. Why do I need to be grateful for that situation? Because did I become an impatient person when I had children? No. I was always impatient. But my children revealed that in me, right? Was I always like sarcastic or biting was I always like that? Yes, I was. But that didn't come out because it was my children that revealed my weaknesses. Why is it good? It doesn't feel good, but why is it good to have your weaknesses revealed? Because then God can use those weaknesses and He can show you His mercy and He can call you to deeper growth. God uses our children to refine us. And that's the way it's supposed to be. If I look at, am I a different person than I was a year ago? I kind of feel like, oh, probably not really. But am I a different person I was 10 years ago? Absolutely. How has that change happened? It's really happened through my vocation of being a wife and a mother. And this is the path to holiness for the laity. This is how God has chosen to make you holy, is through being a mother, being a father, being a spouse. So our path to holiness is not through hours of adoration or mystic experiences, and it doesn't look, our path to holiness doesn't look the way it looks for a religious. It doesn't look the way it looks for a single person. This is God's natural process for us. You know, one day I was reflecting kind of like on that whole idea of how did I get to where I am today? Like, how did God make me the woman that I am through all of these different things? And I realized it really all started in the campus of Franciscan University, you know, over 30 years ago, looking across campus and seeing this guy and being like, you know what, that guy's kind of hot, right? That's somebody, that's somebody that I would like to meet, right? And then what happened? That little spark happened. Then we started dating. We fell in love. We get married. We have children. You know, those children slowly drive us crazy, right? But those children, through just being themselves, refined me, showed me my selfishness, showed me my dependency on God's mercy, allowed God to love me even more. That's this arc. And what happened there, that little spark that happened to having children, that happens hundreds of thousands of times all over the world, right? This is how God works. And He goes from this guy is hot to I'm going to make you holy, right? This is what God does for us as married people. And we have to open our eyes to really see this vocation of holiness, of being a parent. This isn't just taking care of these kids. This isn't like we started this point. It's not about you making your child into something, though formation is obviously the job of a parent, but it really, we need to look at ourselves and say, how is this vocation making me better? How is my child forming me? Where do I need to learn more about God's love for me?
Which leads us to our second point, that if you want to be a great parent, you need to be an amazing spouse. These kids were the fruit of your love, the fruit of your marriage, and even in adoption, right? They're still coming forth from this marriage. And so they need to not only come forth from that marriage, they need to be nurtured and connected to that love. There's something very vital about us understanding our order of identity. And the idea that before we were married, we were a son and daughter. And then we're a spouse, a bride, a groom, husband, a wife. And then father and a mother. And then everything else out in the world. But when we skip over, because too many times, and I think this is a trap for a lot of women sometimes, is they get trapped in a room thinking they're only mom. They're only serving the household. And they need to remember that first and foremost, they're a bride, they're a spouse. This is true for husbands and wives, but there's something very unique about women who lay down their lives and spend themselves for their kids. Children need our couple love. They need the love of a mom and a dad. And I grew up in a divorced family. My parents got divorced before I went into high school, and probably many of you have been through that as well. But there was wounds, there was challenges, there were issues that I had to work through in that. But the day, or a couple days before we got married, my dad pulled me aside, and he said, I want you to know this. You need to make sure you put your wife before any of your future kids, before they come. They need to know that she is first in your life. And he says, because I didn't do that. And it hit me hard, because there's something very powerful that we as a couple bring to our children that they need. It's a sure, fixed point. Parents often see their kids' needs as urgent. They're always, right there. Those needs are screaming at them. Sometimes literally screaming at them, right? And the urgent is always demanding on us. But when is your marriage urgent? Not until it's in crisis. That's when it's urgent. But your marriage is always important. And we need to make sure, this is why these date nights are so vital. Parents need, more than anyone else, to remember their marriage is first. Their marriage is good, not only for them, but for their children. Your children need to bask in the glow of your love. They need to have that as a power in their lives. And that God gives us the grace to be a parent through our marriage. So this is from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. By the grace proper to the sacrament of matrimony, couples help one another to attain holiness in their married life and in the welcoming, the educating, and the forming of their children. That's what the church says. This is where you get the grace to be a parent. This is where you get the grace to be a mom. There is no sacrament of motherhood, no sacrament of fatherhood. The grace to be a mom and a dad comes first from this marriage. Not so long ago, I knew everything there was to know about raising kids. I was confident, I was full of energy, I had it all figured out. I was sure of myself, and I was very opinionated. I knew exactly how I was going to handle everything from sleep issues to tantrums to teenage years to back talk to sibling conflicts. I had it all down. And then I actually became a parent. And I realized that we didn't know what we were doing. So when we were first married, we consumed books on parenting. Now, when I married Alicia, we have 10 children, but she is one of 10. So I thought, not only did I fall in love with her because she is obviously gorgeous and has a beautiful voice, but she came from this large family, so I'm like, hey, bonus, she'll know what we're doing here. And
Not really.
and so we would read these books, and by we, I mean, I heard about these books. And but has anyone ever crowdsourced, ideas on parenting? Anybody? Maybe you don't have to admit it. Okay. But has anyone read books on parenting? Or maybe listened to podcasts on parenting? There's a lot of sources out there for information. But we found a lot of people telling us, nobody had a problem, tell us exactly how to perfectly parent your child. And there really was this idea that there were books on, breastfeeding versus pacifiers, co-sleeping versus sleep training. There was wearing your baby versus putting them in the swing. There was even books about how to lay your child down to sleep, which side, on the back. And every single one seemed to say, if you don't do it our way, you will irreparably, permanently damage your child. And the other book said the exact opposite and said, but if you don't do this way, and it just added a mountain of stress. There's this tyranny of experts that are trying to tell you what to do. And there really is a problem when the world or the experts out there are saying all of these things, and they're simply adding this mountain of guilt and concern and anxiety to your plate. And I don't know where I got the idea, but it was very simple. I just said, let's stop. Let's stop reading for a little bit, and let's figure this out. I don't know why God gave us these kids, but I think we can figure this out together. People have been doing this for a while, I hear, and I don't know why God entrusted your children to you, but He did. He trusted you with them, and I believe, and we have found, that you can do this. Because at the end of the day, if you find one method that works for you in your home, in your household, if it works for you, great, but if it doesn't, why are you continuing down that path, right? And we have found with our 10 kids, each one seemed to change a little bit. I'm like, oh, why isn't there a Hernon model? We figured it out once and we got it for all the kids. So the principle here is that you need to have confidence, not in a method or a training, but have confidence in each other. That's where, when you have this deep desire for unity in your plans, if you will, as a mom, as a dad, in leading in your household, the other spouse has ideas. Now, again, if you look out there, there's a lot of books and a lot of blogs and a lot of resources on parenting. And it's heavily skewed towards moms, which I think is awesome and beautiful. And there are probably a lot of reasons why moms are more intrigued by that idea and more motivated in that. But there is a motherly instinct and there's a fatherly instinct. There is something that we have that we need to recognize and lean on each other. Because the best source for parenting advice is your spouse. Best source is your spouse, right? So we need you to enter parenting. We need to always approach parenting with a certain level of humility and confidence. Meaning humility that we're still working on things. There's many surveys that say about 94% of all parents are just making it up as we go along. Part of our family motto is fake it until you make it. But you need to enter with humility, looking for, seeking out, but also having confidence. And that confidence is in each other, in your spouse.
So, after making sure that your marriage is strong and at the center of your family, at the foundation of your family, what's next? Well, at the heart of family is obviously relationships. One-on-one relationships and communal relationships. What brings us to our third point is that every child needs to be loved individually and passionately. There's something that is so unique about the love between a parent and child, and nothing can replace that. So you, as a mother and father, you are much more than just a set of arms that holds this baby, right? You are connected to them. Obviously, the connection between mother and child is most clear, because a baby is physically tethered to its mother for those 9 months. And then the father is connected to that child through, well, obviously biologically, but also through that covenant of husband and wife. So every child that comes from this woman belongs to this man. And studies have shown that biological connection between parent and child is one of the strongest human connections that we have. Fathers have, so obviously we all know that mothers are irreplaceable, and mothers carry within themselves the cells of their children. I don't know if you knew that, but you can test the blood of a mother, and she has the cells of all of the children that she has born, and that carry with her whole life. And it's so beautiful how that spiritual connection, right, is also a biological connection. Fathers, studies have been done again and again about the powerful effect that a father has on their children. There's another biological effects. There's a 2019 study. They followed children from birth to 15 years of age. And dads who rated highly on involvement during play had children who had, as teenagers, who had higher levels of security, emotional responsiveness, fewer problems regulating emotions, and less anxiety and depression. What I find interesting about that is that it's not like, oh, the fathers followed this very specific, words that they said, or this very respectful. No. It just says they just played with their kids. This is not complicated. Just played with the kids, And it had this powerful effect on those children. There's a 2018 study of preterm infants followed preemie babies from birth to 3 years of age. Those children who, as toddlers, showed attachment to their fathers who were present, who looked at them, who held them, and those toddlers were obviously attached to their fathers, those children were 30% bigger, physically bigger, than those who did not have attachment to their fathers. Isn't that amazing? That just simple connection of fathers was shown in actual physical results in those children. And if you look at GPAs of kids who are living in a home with a married mother and father who go to church have GPAs that are 12% higher. All of this is simply, so there's a saying that either studies confirm what common sense suggests or they're wrong, right? We all know that we parents are important, but it is so good for us to see that and to hear that and to really know that. And on the spiritual level, parents are essential because parents are the ones who form the child's first images of God. Again, from Familiaris Consortio, their parental love, mothers and fathers' parental love, is called to become for the children the visible sign of the very love of God, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named. You know, it's not by accident that when Jesus came, he revealed God as what? Not just as creator, not just as supreme being. Jesus came to show us what? The Father. He revealed himself as Father. I think that's very much on purpose. So we as parents are forming our children's first images of God, so they will ultimately, our goal, my deepest desire in my life, is that all of my children know they have a Heavenly Father who loves them and is there for them long after we are gone. So that's what we as parents are doing. We're laying that foundation. So by loving your children, by playing with them, reading to them, disciplining them, you're strengthening their relationship with God. And it's very, very important that we do not over-spiritualize this, okay? Children are very, very simple. So it's not necessarily through hours of prayer or making your home into a mini church. Your children have a church to go to. Your home needs to be a home, right? It needs to be a place where your children are loved. Yes, you should pray with your children, but if you're going to pray with your children, you need to play with your children. And so playing with your children, simply by doing those things, you are forming their first images of God. And this is actually a very, very important, solemn task. St. Alphonsus Liguori, he's really a hard hitter, this saint. He says, "Were fathers and mothers to lead a life of piety and continual prayer and receive communion every day, they should be damned if they neglected the care of their children." Why does he say that? He says that because parenting is our path to holiness. This is how God made you a parent, and he said, this is how I want you to be holy. And if we reject that and say, no, we're going to act like a religious and do something else, he's like, no, no, no. This is how you're going to be holy. You're going to get up in the middle of the night with this child who is throwing up on you. Yep, making you holy right there. That's the way we need to see our lives, through those new eyes. So, oh yes.
Just kind of going to the idea earlier, Alicia talked about the challenges, how our kids expose our weaknesses. But we're also talking about how we form them, how we love them. And God uses our kids, our marriage, to shape us into who we were meant to be. And we also need to recognize how much God wants all these things to happen for our good. Well, in the middle of the night, Alicia was talking about waking up in the middle of the night. Any parent get woken up in the middle of the night? Is that a thing? Well, there was no child screaming, but for some reason I woke up. And I went around and I checked on the little guys and seen anybody roll out of their bed. And I opened the door to my teenage daughter's room, and her bed was empty. Went downstairs. She's not downstairs. And this was a daughter who was really, really good at pushing my buttons. This was a daughter who was great at pushing boundaries, the eye rolls, the late curfews. So I pulled out my phone. I love GPS tracking. And I wanted to see where she was. And just to be clear, when I shared the story one time, she said, "Was she at the chapel?" Oh, yeah, you heard this? She was not at the chapel, okay? And I was furious. I was so angry. I just felt betrayed. I felt taken advantage of. And I was also scared. I was scared because nothing good happens after midnight. And so I texted her, and if I could send flaming emojis, and I've always thought maybe like that Harry Potter message that screams out, right? That would be great. Yeah, the howler. That's right. I just texted, "Come home now." And she says, "Coming!" And if she walked through the door that very second, I would have unleashed upon her. I was so over the top. And in that briefest moment, I remember just being in that room, the one little light on, everything else in the house was quiet and dark. And I just said this briefest of prayers. I said, "God, give me wisdom and give me strength." That was it. That's all I said. The grace was real. The grace was alive, because in that moment, the poison of my anger, and I had an anger issue, right? I had an anger problem. The poison was removed, and I knew what I was going to say. When she walked through the door, I said, "Honey, are you okay?" And she says, yeah, Dad, you just don't, you need to understand. And honey, I just want you to know, no matter what happened, I love you. Okay? And she, again, tried to defend. She's really good. She could have been a lawyer, right? You know, she's trying to say all the things. I'm like, we're going to talk about this in the morning. God gave me the little insight that it would not go well if we had the conversation right then. So I said, go to bed, we'll talk about it in the morning. Now, nothing irreparable happened that night and all of that, but what did happen the next morning, I was now at a little bit of distance from that emotion. I was now calm, cool, collected, and I could talk about it with great clarity. And I don't think she slept very well that night. And she was much more disposed to our conversation the next morning. And that actually began a whole shift in the way that our relationship was. And the reason I bring this up is that when we are looking at our kids, no matter what age they are, what we often have to bring to the table is about here. And what they need is here. And that gap in between is God's grace. How we parent as Catholics is leaning into God's grace. Knowing that it isn't a question of, are you strong enough? Are you good enough to be a parent? Are you weak enough? Are you willing to admit that I need God to parent my kids because I don't have what it takes, but He does. We don't need just your best. Your kids need God's best. So working through those challenges, working through our own junk in our life so that we can give the best to our kids, because our kids need that. And there are many times when we have failed, right? There's many times when I have failed my kids, lost my cool, yelled at them, right? Thinking back on situations, and we can always repent. We can always change. But what we need to always remember is that God is doing this for our good as well as for theirs. And as we step into our role, being that first images for God, it's not a light task, but it's something that we are being called to. Stepping out of who we have, just the normal, natural stuff we have, and He is going to multiply that for our good and for our kids.
So just a couple practical things about how to love your children, just some ideas of how to see and love your children individually. So first, just to be a student of your child. And what do we mean by that? We mean learn their love languages, learn their personality type, learn their temperament, right? All of that helps you to really target and love them and to understand them the way that they need to be loved. All of us kind of default to our own personality, right? When it's either motivating someone or teaching someone. But newsflash, your children probably have a different personality than you do, right? Because they are not you. They're extensions of us. But we need to learn about them as a person and see them, see their goodness, delight in that goodness, and then communicate that goodness to them. We always encourage parents to have what we call special time. It's like this, trademark that's very complicated, special time. But special time, what that means is that's simply one-on-one time that you have with your child doing something that they love to do. And why that is important is because kids want what is most precious to us. What is the one thing that is so precious to all of us? Our time, right? Kids need our time. And even if it's 15 minutes when you're doing errands and you say, you know what, we're going to stop by McDonald's or whatever, we're going to get a milkshake and go in and sit down and we'll just talk. Or I brought packs of cards into Wendy's and we get a Frosty and then we just play a card game there just to get them out of the house. Sometimes it can be bigger things. Taking them out to the movies, or taking if they're older kids, taking them out shopping or to coffee. But those one-on-one times where they can really be seen and known and loved is really, really very, very important. Another thing is just sharing your story. I remember as a child sitting around the dinner table and my dad telling us stories of his childhood. And of course it's just interesting to picture your dad as like a little kid, but what he was doing is that in very subtle ways, he was just normalizing the human experience in telling us times when he got in fights with his friends, or he did things that were wrong, and how he was, the consequences to that or whatever. And they weren't necessarily always teaching a lesson, but subtly they really were. And that's what we can do for our kids. So when our kids are having a hard time, one of the best things we can give to somebody who's struggling is empathy. To be able to say to somebody, yeah, I felt that way too. When your 6-year-old comes home and says, somebody pushed me down at the playground or whatever, and we're very tempted to be like, who is that kid? I'm going to go and just get them, or whatever. But what your child needs right there is they need to know, yeah, I understand. That sounds really hard. That happened to me once too. Maybe not exactly that, but to show them that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to get hurt. And you can overcome that because I'm your parent and I'm going to be here for you. And I'm going to walk with you. You're not alone. So that kind of empathy is what we can give to our children. And then last, your children, what do they need? They really just need you to be holy. And they need you to love them. Yeah, that's all. Just be holy. They don't, but why I say that is because they don't need you to be perfect or do everything right. Because, the Lord knows we have made our share of mistakes with our kids. Every parent makes mistakes because we're all a bunch of sinners trying to raise these little kids, right? If you think about it, before the age of reason, if you have kids all under the age of 6, you're the only sinners in the house. They're the pure souls, right? There's sins happening in the house, it's all you. And that's humbling, right? To recognize that and to realize that. And so when you make mistakes, it's okay. We have this thing called confession, right? And we have this thing called forgiveness and apologizing. What children need, they need you to just love them. They need you to love them in your own messy way, and God will do the rest.
And our fourth and final point is creating a family culture to exponentially influence your kids. So I think we have the definition there on the sheet, I believe. But family culture is a way of life. It's kind of an unwritten set of expectations, beliefs, and values that confers identity, belonging, and mission on its members. Every family has a culture right now within our homes. And the only question we have is, what messages are we sending to our children, to our family? What are we allowing to be kind of the expectation, the standard within our home? What is that message? Because there's a really true principle here that more is caught than taught. The do as I say, not as I do does not work, right? It's what are we allowing? What are we intentionally building within our home? And I mentioned that I grew up in a divorced family, and there really was a negative culture for me growing up. And in spite of the fact that I had a great relationship with my mom, there was a peace at any price or avoidance of conflict. Just kind of this negative culture that really was impacting me as a kid and growing up. And as we look at our families, we need to kind of, again, look with those genuine, authentic eyes and say, how was it and how is it right now? How is the kind of the peer pressure, if you will, within our home? And that this family culture is simple, the traditions, the rituals, the habits, the modes of operating, if you will, within your home. What do those look like? What are those habits saying your priorities are? What are those traditions that are saying this is what's important to be a part of our family? Because as your kids are asking those questions of who am I? What is my identity? You're passing that on by the things that you do. My kids know that they're Hernons because this is what Hernons do. We may not do things that other families do because we're Catholic, because we do X, Y, and Z. We're unique in our own way. And those things add on a powerful, powerful message to our kids about who they are, where they belong, and what their purpose is, what their mission is. And your culture in your home, it really... the culture within your home one of the things we often talk about is that your culture is actually the secret weapon. We believe your family culture is the secret weapon of Catholic families. Because your culture needs to be stronger than the secular culture out there. I mean, that's how we protect our kids. That's how we kind of create this wall, this beautiful defense. And it isn't that our kids aren't living in the world. We have to recognize all the challenges and issues that are out there. But if you think about it this way, particularly when your kids are young, you control everything that comes into your home. You control where your kids go. You choose what schools they go to. You even choose, in some ways, what friends they can hang out with. As a family, we need to say, what are we doing in our home? What is that culture? So that when your kids go out and experience the world, they can say, that's not authentic love. That's not what goodness really is. That's not what truth is, because I've experienced it in my house. You know, there are many powerful forces at work in the world, but nobody has the opportunity, the influence, and the authority that moms and dads do. But we need to take back that authority. We need to take back the home and the culture that we're building within.
So holiness for the laity is not found out in the mission fields, right? It's found in your home. And this is where we are imparting that identity, belonging, and mission on our children. And why our culture needs to answer those questions, because if those questions are not answered within your home, who am I? Where do I belong? What am I here for? The world will answer those questions for your kids. You need to answer those questions. They need to know who they are, where they belong, what they're here for. Because if they don't know that from you, they will look for those answers elsewhere. But also within the family, this is where you and I are being transformed. This is where I am learning more deeply who I am as a mother, as a wife. Where do I belong within this family? What is my mission, right? My mission here to love. Because parents, we don't have a seminary. We just have kids. This is the formation right here. They're the ones that teach us how to love. They're the ones that teach us how to sacrifice and live for others. And also, this is where we as families become a witness of God's love for humanity. Again, the church tells us that family has the mission to guard, reveal, and communicate love. And this is a living reflection of and a real sharing in God's love for humanity and the love of Christ the Lord for the church, his bride. When families act as they were created to be, we can be a powerful force of transformation and renewal in the entire world. When people look around and they say, how does God love? They should be able to look at you loving your kids and say, that's how God loves. That's how God loves us. Like a father loves his child, like a mother holds her baby. That is the love of God. And that is what people are looking for. We all know, right, that there's a lot of wounded people walking around in this world, aren't they? There are. What are those people are looking for what you have in your home right now, what you are giving to your children right now. And never ever doubt how important your little messy family is, right? How important that is, not only for you or for your children, but really for the whole world. Really for the whole world. As Catholic families, we have a great responsibility because we've been given great grace by God through the sacraments, through teaching, through this intercession of the saints, all of that. And so we have that responsibility to respond to that grace and be who God is calling us to be. You know, as we started this off, introducing you to our ministry, we really want to keep in touch with you. Our life is dedicated to serving families. This is our full-time job. There's no big organization behind us. It's us and a few employees that create our content, that offer our courses, that do the podcast, all of that. And really because we believe that this is one of the most important works of the church, is the renewal of the family. So we would love to take some questions right now, but even after today, we'd love to keep in touch with you. So I think that we have cards back there. If you want to just write your name, an email, we can send you resources. We get a monthly newsletter that goes out. You can put it in the basket there so we can stay in touch with you. Oh, yes. Also, by the way, in preparation for Lent, we have a Lenten program for couples called Cana 90. It's a free program. You can sign up. You can get daily emails or weekly emails. There's weekend projects, things you can do with your kids. But it's really to help you focus on that path to holiness of being a spouse and a parent and doing that for Lent and looking at Lent through the eyes, not just for your kids, but for you, right? Instead of maybe, the idea I always give is like, if you feel like, you know what, for Lent, I should do an hour's adoration. And that's really beautiful. But if you have little toddlers at home, maybe God wants you to do like 15 minutes of adoration and then go home and play Candyland with your kids, Go take the kids for 45 minutes from your wife or from your husband, right? So that's the kind of thing that we do in Cana 90 is to help you to grow in holiness as a spouse and parent. But anyway, we had books, but I think they're all sold. But if you wanted to, yes, the webinar. So we have a webinar that we're doing. If you're interested in that, it's on Monday. What's today? Today's Saturday, right? Okay, so it's on Monday at 8:30. And you can go to our website, messyfamilyproject.org, sign up for that so we can keep in touch with you. So do you have any questions? So we give this analogy a lot of times for raising children is it's like teaching a child how to swim, okay? So as far as like how much freedom you give and when do you do that? Because we've seen too many parents who give children no freedom at all, and then they go off to college and they go crazy, right? So when I say teaching a child how to swim, when you're first teaching a kid how to swim, right, you have that baby in the water and you're holding on to them, you never let them out of your sight, never let them, your hands are always on top of them, right? But then, as they get older, they're like swimming and they're in an arm's reach of you, right? And then they're swimming in the pool, but you need to be right there on the side of the pool. But what's the goal? What is the goal for you? The goal is that they are in the ocean, beyond the breakers, swimming, enjoying themselves, and you're on the shore watching them. It doesn't happen all at once. You cannot take a baby and just throw them in there and expect them to swim. So what is the essential element there? It's freedom. They're going to go under the water sometimes, right? They're going to come up choking. Sometimes you can be there, right? And you catch them, but they have to have that element of freedom. So, and freedom, really another thing that goes with that is trust. Because your children, I want my child to do what is right, not because I'm going to catch them, right? That's really the formation of virtue. I want them to do what is right because they have a heavenly Father who knows them, who loves them, and who's always watching them. I asked my son, he was about 12 years old, said, why do you go to Mass? And I was expecting, there's a lot of reasons to go to Mass, obviously, right? It's a mortal sin to not go to miss Mass on Sunday. But he didn't say that. He said, I'm going to Mass to be with Jesus. I was like, yes, that's what I want. Because when he goes off and he's by himself, he can't just go to Mass because Mom tells him to, or because Mom's spying on him to see whether he's going to Mass or not. He needs to go to Mass because he wants to be with our Lord. And so it's developing that relationship with the Lord and that real trust with you.
And just to add a point, when we think about technology, like the dots or other things, there's no problem using devices. Like if you give your kids a device, you would be a fool just to hand it to them. Right? For a car, I believe this is more dangerous than driving a car in the moral life. To go to a car, you have to go through instruction and driver's ed, and then you're trained, and you go through this, and then you are licensed, or you're permitted and then licensed. We need to teach our kids and give them that kind of runway. We want them to drive. We want, again, same thing with the analogy Alicia used. So with devices, with all these things, we need to make sure that we're trying to build Christian maturity. In the early days, it's about using that analogy is protecting their innocence to build in Christian maturity. And it's not easy to do because too quickly the world, and sometimes we are influenced by this, they just give things frivolously. They give things like, everyone has it. You ever hear that? Any teenager ever say, oh, everybody has a device, right? And we need to be able to hold off those things so that they aren't influencing our kids in ways that we're not aware of. Yeah, so going back to our question, are you building Christian maturity? And that's a question I ask everybody. Are you building Christian maturity in your child by spying on them? If they're, a little kid,
So 10?
it's easy. Yes, of course you want to know where they are. You want to be aware of where they are. Whether it's by a phone that you know who's got eyes on them. But if they're in the teen years,
16, 17?
Again, I know where my kids are right now. I don't know. I don't consider that necessarily spying.
Because they know it.
They know it, and I tell them it, right? And I have no problem with that. However, what are they doing right now? I don't know. Now I'm getting anxious. What are they doing? But I mean, that's the part of parents that we need to know, that there are certain decisions that they shouldn't be allowed to make when they're young and they're immature and they don't know. And as parents, we need to start building that in age appropriately so that they can really engage in that. Thank
That's
you.
a great
That's a
question.
great question.
I would remember
Is that good?
Any other
Okay.
questions?
Yes, ma'am. So we have 10 kids, so we obviously see each other sometimes. And
10 times.
and no, but that's obviously it's a very real thing because we do do our best to love our kids, even individually having special time. It feels like there's always more to do. But what it comes down to is that for us, we've gone through struggles. We've gone through ups and downs where we have made time for each other, and there are times when we've kind of just drifted. And we share some stories on our podcast and in other venues where we just need to make the time. When we said the idea that kids' needs are always urgent, it's simply saying, like right now, we go on weekly date nights. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but every couple, every happily married couple, and I as a divorced child of a divorced family, I always look for successful marriages and say, what's the secret? What works? How did you keep the love alive? Over and over again, they say date nights, regular date nights. And for us, I have to put it in my calendar, not always fancy dates, that some are very simple, some are just playing games, some of it's going out, but having those regular connections. And then if we miss a week, that's okay, because we got it next week, and then it's always there. But you really need a little daily check-in. You need a weekly or at least monthly date. And then every year, annually, you need to go away, because your relationship is built with the material of time. That's how we build a good and strong marriage, is built with the material of time. We got to give that time to our spouse.
And we have kind of a couple principles that we weave throughout all of our podcasts and all of our materials. And one of those principles is that there are different priorities within the family, okay? And those priorities cannot get out of order. So the first priority is the spiritual life of the home. Second priority is marriage. Third priority is relationships with children. Fourth priority is development of gifts. Last priority is family operations. That's like keeping everybody fed and clothed, chores, budgets, schedules, all of those kinds of things. If we are making chores, budget, schedule more important than our children, that's wrong, right? If we are making the development of our children's gifts, travel, soccer, swimming, dance, whatever, if that is taking all of our time and we have no time for our marriage, that's also out of whack. So we need to make sure, but we can live a life where those priorities are all there, and then we can live a life that is balanced. And so how do we find each other? We made it a priority, because you make time for what's important to you. So if you say, my marriage is very important to me, but I never talk with my spouse, I never see them alone without the children, we never go away together, I would say, it sounds like they're really not a priority. And how do we do that? We make time for that. We have to be very intentional about our lives, because what your children need more than anything, they need you. They need this, right? They need just not the love of dad or the love of mom, but they need your couple love. They need to bask in the love of their parents. They need that more than they need anything else. So you can do it. So first of all, we have a podcast. We have a podcast about a lot of things. We have a podcast on educational choices that kind of gives some good principles. But The bottom line, this is what I would say. First of all, what have we done? We've done everything. And we've homeschooled, we did public school, we've done Catholic school, we've done, part-time school, we've done it all. And really, for us, it's that year-to-year decision on the needs. And so there's 3 things to consider, right? So these are 3 kind of like, whatever, a rubric to use. First of all, you have to look at, first, of course, the needs of the child, right? What does this child need right now? How are they doing socially, academically? Is it better for them to be in this school or whatever, right? Or homeschooled? What are this child's individual needs? And that's usually the biggest, the most, that's a starting point for most of us. But then the second thing is, what are the needs of the family? How does this fit into our budget, right? What does this mean as far as little driving around? How far away the school is, if other kids have to be like carted around from here to there and everywhere. How is this going to affect our family, this schooling option? Or same thing with homeschooling, like, how is that going to affect our family? But then the last thing, which we sometimes forget about, is what are the needs of mom? Because you know what? If mom is burned out and she's ready to crack, then that is a huge thing to be considered. Because mom is the one who really carries a lot of that burden, whether it's kids in school or homeschool. And there is no perfect answer, because everybody's situation is so different. All the children, of my children in my family, they've all done different things. And it's also, I've been at different places in different different times of life. Sometimes there have been times I'm like, you're all going to school because mom's going to lose her mind, And sometimes I'm like, okay, I can homeschool 2 kids. And we're going to have some kids in school and some kids are at home. It really just kind of depends. And then also, probably one of the things to consider too is your community. What is the community like when you consider the needs of the family? I think that community kind of goes in there, whether it's a homeschooling community, whether it's a beautiful Catholic school community, classical school community, whatever. But I think that those 3 things, considering the needs of the child, the family, and mom's needs, that's really what you need to consider.
And not specifically to answer your question, but I think it relates to it, and it kind of goes back to the earlier question. We encourage, and we've been doing this for 15 plus years, is we host a family board meeting. Is anyone familiar with this idea? No, maybe some. But the idea here is that as the husband and wife, you are the board of your little family Inc. You are the executive team, and that you need to take time to think about some of these big topics, like educational choices. How are our kids doing? How's our marriage doing? How are we surviving in the midst of a crazy mixed up world? So every year we take time away and we look at the big picture. And then we say, okay, let's take, again, without going through all the details, we have lots of free resources on our website about this, and a worksheet to help you. But kind of coming up with who we are as a family, where are we going, and what this year is most important to us. Because so many times our life just gets filled up with other stuff. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but every yes needs to be protected by 1,000 no's. Meaning when we say yes to something, like let's just use date night, or we're going to make this choice and we're like, this is going to be the best educational choice, or we evaluate it on that time. And we say, okay, this year, I think we're going to try this new school and see how it works. And we're caring about both academic needs, her emotional needs, or her community and social needs and all that. And then we as a couple say, we're united. Because too many times as couples, we're shooting from the hip. We're just flying along. We're responding moment to moment to the urgent circumstances in front of us. What do we really want to build? And if we don't have a longer picture in mind, and we don't understand where the decisions this year are and how they align to what we really care about, what we believe the mission that God has given our family, then we're not going to be living out an intentional life. That's the power that a family board meeting, the first one, it'll take a little time, but then it gets easier and easier, and you can look back and say, yeah, we're moving the needle. We're getting out of the maybe survival zone. We're not just surviving our family life, we're thriving in our family life. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, awesome. Congratulations, that's awesome news. Hey, any other grandparents here? Raise your hands, grandparents. Okay. All right, so talk to these people for the longer answer, right? The short answer is, man, I wish I could have started with being a grandparent, they are a joy. Locally, I'll say one of the things that we had one of our kids have their children when they were in town with us, and one was farther away. When they were farther away, we went down and visited when the baby was born, and we helped out in a big way. When they were local, we were there, we helped out, but we were staying in our own house. So make it special. Lavish the young couple with your love and your support because they need that. They need to be strengthened. Not you taking over, but you really being there and saying, you got this. And we're here for you. We're still your mom and dad. We'll always be your mom and dad. But we couldn't be more proud of you. And come in and fix things and take care of the house and do all these wonderful things so that they know that they are prized. And then as the baby grows, give them the opportunity to go out on date nights. To make sure that you go, and what's great for us to watch the babies and then send them home when they start.
And one thing too, that as you're, watching your children raise your grandchildren, they're going to raise them differently than you raised them, right? Because they're different people, it's a different family. And so one thing, if the young people, even my own kids ask me for advice, I'd say, well, what do you think you should do? And what do you think you should do? Really empower them. Really empower them. And like Mike said, you can do this. You can do this. When they come to you, they're like, I can't sleep. It's so hard. You're like, I know. You can do this. Then you go home and you go to sleep. No, but I think having that cheerleader in their corner and just knowing, and like the date night thing, is really so helpful because it's hard for parents to get out. So I know you have a question too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's conversation. And really, I think we always have to look at when couples come to us and ask, they're at different pages with things, what we can always go back to is, what can I change? I can only change myself, right? I can only change myself. And if we are on different pages with our spouses about something, even something about the priority of marriage, we can always make sure that we are doing what we think is right. And what is right, I will tell you right now, is first of all, loving God, depending on His grace, and loving your spouse, right? And that's always the bottom line. And you can always do that. And recognize, we had heard this talk once by another couple who I just really admired. They talked about their marriage and the first commandment. And what they found is that throughout their marriage, they were looking to their spouse for their ultimate affirmation. And they got to the point of realizing that doesn't work because God comes before their spouse. They need to recognize that their deepest longing of their heart is not for the love of their spouse. The deepest longing of their heart is to be known by God their Father. And when I receive God's love, I need to receive that first. And then I receive the love of God through my spouse, through my vocation. So it's very, very important that we have that spiritual life of the home. Your own relationship with God is in line. And then we can have the grace to love our spouse and to love our children.
And regardless of where you are at or where you and your spouse might be on different pages, who can you control? There's only one person you control, right? It's yourself. And we want to take extreme ownership for what we can control and how we invest and how we love. And so as Alicia said, it's the receiving the love, knowing where you get your affirmations from, and then loving. Marriage isn't built on a feeling. Marriage isn't built on a whim. It's built on decisions to love. And the gift that we give is our very hearts, our very minds. And that important gift is something sacred that all of us need to embrace. And sometimes we need to, again, remind our spouses that, as busy as we are with the kids or life or other things that are going on, that they were first, again, our bride. They were first our husband. They were first our wife and groom. And so we need to do everything in our power to give ourselves more fully, which often means I'm taking care of the issues in my life. If I had anger issues with my kid, I've also had anger issues with my wife. I've had issues that I had to work on. I had to become the man that she needed me to be, that I had to give more fully, more freely, more virtuously love to her in a way that she was receiving. And then that requires us to change. And change isn't easy. Nobody wants, on some level, to change, but that's where true happiness is. That's where joy is found. And something that we often get a question on is it too late? You know, if we haven't done some things in our marriage, or if we haven't done things that way we wanted to with our kids, is it too late? It's never too late. You know, there's an old proverb that says the best day to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And the second best day is today. And so as you look at your marriage, as you look at your family, as you look at wherever you're at in your relationship and with your children, grown or still in the house, we can always begin again. And I feel like the church has gifted us with times like Lent for us to say, okay, let's begin again. Let's begin the journey. And we really would encourage you to take time this Lent to double down on your vocation, your path to holiness, your marriage, your family, and saying, how can I live my vocation more fully? How can I invest more deeply in God's sacred calling to our parenting? And so for our hope for you is that on that front side you have a summary of the talk, and on the back side is some questions. Some conversation starters for you and your spouse to think through some of the things we had. So we'd encourage you to think this through and to work on it in such a way that it might be a great date night conversation, whether it be here tonight or whether it be a future date for us together. Are they going to do it right now? Yeah. So what we'd encourage, and it's usually an easy way to do this, is first you kind of write some ideas down individually, and then you actually have a conversation about it. See, some people process differently. And it's good to give each spouse a little time to do some reflection on their own, and then have a conversation together. And again, we really love being here. Thank you, Jennifer, Father Bob is left, I think, for sisters. Thank you for the joy of your witness, the image that you provide. And thank you, all of you, for making time for this date night. Your marriage is worth it. Your family is worth it. This is really, really important. So we'd love to stay connected with you, and God bless you all, and have a wonderful night.